Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nikita, and on this channel we chat about diversity and inclusion of BIPOC stories, especially South Asian stories, both in fiction and in real life. So you can expect a lot of book chat, book recommendations, as well as videos of my podcast called Brown People Problems. So for today's video, I wanted to replicate a book recommendation tag that I have been seeing going around on YouTube, and I wanted to do a BIPOC version of it. So if you weren't aware already, BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color, and on my channel I like to focus on stories that are inclusive of BIPOC identities as well. It's my first time doing any type of a book tag, so if you enjoyed this kind of video, feel free to let me know down below. Alright, number one. A book you tell people is your favorite. Now, you're probably sick of hearing me talk about this, but I think clear winner here is Keke by Vaishnavi Patel. There's a lot of hype around this. You've probably heard me talk about this book over and over and over again, but this is definitely a book that I've been telling people is a recent favorite of mine. Now, if by some miracle you haven't heard of it or you're new to this, Keke is by Vaishnavi Patel is a Indian mythological retelling. So if you enjoy books like Circe by Madeline Miller or some of these Greek mythological retellings, you'll definitely enjoy this. I made a separate video about that as well. I'll link it up here below for you if you want to check it out. But this is a story of a sort of like evil stepmother type of a figure from Hindu mythology, and this is a feminist retelling of what maybe her story was like, right? That is outside of this narrative of evil stepmother. The story follows Keke from the time of her birth until much later on in her life. You definitely see a bit of intergenerational family dynamics in here as well, which is something that I really love. And there's a fantasy element in here as well, which was something that I wasn't expecting. That was a nice surprise. But it's a really, really lovely story of a woman who has really been villainized and who is actually a lot more complex than that and isn't so much black and white. All right, next up, I have a book that is your guilty pleasure. Okay, so something that I recently discovered is I'm enjoying reading a little bit more of these lighter-hearted rom-coms and rom-com fictions, and a couple books that I have discovered recently are the books by Amy Leah. So we have Set on You by Amy Leah, which was the first one in the series, and then X's and O's, which is the second one. I definitely devoured these both in 1 week, and this is a new genre for me, and these books I really enjoyed reading them. The female protagonists, so easy to fall in love with them. If you haven't heard of these yet, the very first one, Set on You, it follows a curvy fitness Instagrammer and sort of her journey in romance, yes, but also in self-acceptance, self-love, and what does that look like. And I really appreciated that added piece of this as well, because my problem with the romance books for a long time has been that they're just all about romance, and that's not something that I personally enjoy. I enjoy a bit of a story as well. So I really enjoyed this. And then the second one in the series is called X's and O's. It's about Crystal's younger sister or older sister Tara, and sort of her process for finding love, where she decides she's a bookstagrammer, and she decides that the only way she's gonna get a happily ever after is if she reaches out to all of her exes to see if there's a second chance that can be given that's really gonna kind of rescue her. And so it's a really interesting premise, and this one didn't have as much depth for me, as much character depth for me as this one did, Set on You. So I definitely enjoyed Set on You a little bit more, but these two definitely have been my guilty pleasure for this last week. I'm looking forward to the third one that's coming out hopefully soon, because the series focuses around a group of 3 girlfriends. So it's Crystal and Tara, who are sisters, and then the third one is their friend Mel, and it's her story as well. All right, number 3, a book that everyone loved but you didn't. So for me, I don't have a physical copy of this book. I read it on my Kobo, but I have Well-Behaved Indian Women by Samia Dave. Now I know there's a lot of hype around this book. It was on Lily Singh's book club as well, I believe for the month of December of 2022. Now, I did enjoy the book. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't for me as sort of life-changing as it has been for a lot of other people that I've observed online. So Well-Behaved Indian Women is a intergenerational story of three women, the grandma, the mom, and the millennial daughter. The bigger focus of the story is definitely the millennial daughter, Simran, and her mom, Nandini, who's a physician in New York, and Simran, who's a millennial daughter. She's studying to be a therapist. She's in graduate school. And it's a really nice story of how all of these women, you know, kind of had to grapple with certain like realities that come with being a woman in terms of cultural expectations and gender norms and all of that, and what it looks like to find independence in that. So I definitely appreciated that. I wish there was a little bit more depth in some spaces, but it was an overall interesting read. You see the grandmom sort of navigate her own challenges, right? And then you have the mom, who we see a bit of like her past as well. So there's a bit of a jumping back and forth in terms of time in the narrative. And then you have Simran, who's really sort of the main protagonist. And it's about her picking between graduate school and really writing, I believe, which is something that she really enjoys. And also in her love life, what that looks like. So I did enjoy it, but not as much as everyone else. So this fit the question number 3 for me. All right, question number 4, a book you read the fastest. For this, I have the Widows of Malabar Hill series by Sujata Massey. Now this, I don't even remember how I came across this book, but this is a book that is set, it's a series that's set in 1920s India. So it's pre-independence India, and it centers around our main protagonist, Praveen Mistry. She is like Mumbai's only female lawyer and one of the, if not only, first female lawyers in the country. She is practicing in her dad's law firm, and this is a really nice historical fiction. So you get this setting of pre-independence India, what that sort of like looks like, and you know, our main character has a lot of anti-British sentiments, so she's a bit of a rebel in that sense. But essentially the series follows her as she starts off from her first case. This historical fiction has a lot of mystery and intrigue to it, because the character finds herself in assisting with cases or working with cases that involve a murder or a really huge mystery. So she finds herself entangled in that, and as she uncovers the mystery, which is also a really lovely subplot because it keeps you on your toes, you really kind of get to witness this young woman's dance with power, with gender norms, with equality, with the whole idea of independence not just for herself as a woman, but also independence for really her country. And it's a very culturally diverse, very great historical fiction. There are 3 books in this series so far. The first one is Widows of Malabar Hill. The second one, I believe, is a Satapur Moonstone. The third one is the Bombay Prince, and the fourth one is coming out soon. So if you enjoy female protagonists who are independent and who like to solve mysteries, check out Praveen if you like her. Question number 5, a book that deserves more hype. Now I'm going to cheat here a little bit and nominate Widows of Malabar Hill again for this category as well, because I have just not heard anybody anywhere talk about this. Like I said, I don't even remember how I stumbled upon this book. I think it came up for me on Goodreads somehow on my Explore page, and I am so happy that I discovered this. I think this book definitely deserves a lot more hype. Very nicely told mystery, has a bit of a romance subplot as well, but this series really has something for everybody. You know, it has accurate portrayal of history, it has depending on which one you're reading in the series, it has a lot of intrigue around classism and prejudice and religious discrimination. It has a female protagonist searching for her power and independence. So it has all of these really amazing tropes, not in a way that is dull or dry or you kind of feel like you have to drag your feet through, but really written in a beautiful way. So I definitely think this series deserves more hype. Okay, question number 6. A book that is becoming a movie or a TV show. Easy. For this, I have The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. This series, I'm sure you've heard of it. It was on Reese Witherspoon's book club as well some time ago, and this is a lovely series. So I believe this is turning into a Netflix show sometime this year, in 2023. Now, if you haven't heard of The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi, this story follows Lakshmi, who's our main protagonist, set in 1950s India. So this is just post-independence, and it's set in Jaipur, which is sort of this royal city of India, and it follows Lakshmi, who actually leaves an abusive marriage at the age of 17 and moves to the city to kind of earn a living and make a name for herself. And she finds herself working as a henna artist for some of the wealthier ladies of the city and also in royalty. And more than just a henna artist, she has a lot of amazing healing qualities about her, whether it's her presence or her personality or healing henna practices, which was a really nice portrayal of some of these more traditional or older school practices that maybe aren't so prevalent today. Now, the third one in the series is coming out, I believe, at the end of this month, at the end of March. And so The Henna Artist and the second one, which is called The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, the series becomes quite intergenerational at some point, but definitely check this out. Again, a great story filled with a strong female protagonist who is practicing her independence, learning her power. You know, where does she sort of fit into the world? A woman with a vision, a woman who has to hustle and get really creative to make a living and to make a name for herself. So it's a very empowering, a very sort of feel-good, uplifting book, and you definitely feel, you know, your heart racing when Lakshmi encounters like a stressor or a difficulty, and then when she overcomes it, you know, you feel just as proud of her as it, you know, would be you navigating it. So you really get to know her, and I really enjoyed Alka Joshi's storytelling as well. Question number 7, a book that you have reread the most. Now, I know all of my picks have been fiction, but for this, I have a non-fiction pick, and this is Girls That Invest by Simran Kaur. This, you've probably again seen this everywhere. This, exactly like how it sounds, it's a book focused on women who want to learn about financial markets and how to invest. You can see I've got a lot of tabs here, and while I haven't read this front to back several times, I've obviously read it once front to back, I definitely go back to this book into different sections a lot, because you can see I've made my notes, I've got annotations, I've got highlights, and she also has these really great exercises in the book as well to help you discover your own risk profile, your investment values, things like that. And I am definitely going back to this all the time when it comes to managing, you know, my own finances, or when I encounter something, a new term or any sort of news about the financial world, and I don't understand it, or I need some sort of a refresher, I definitely go back to this book as much as I can. This is obviously more of a beginner friendly book, but Simran in her podcast goes a lot more into detail. It's a podcast by the same name, and I think everybody needs this book. It is actually great. I've made it a point to gift this book to all the women in my life in the last year whenever it's their birthday. So whenever it's a girlfriend's birthday, I get them this book, even if they already work in finance, because this book has a really refreshing take on a lot of financial information, which is what actually makes it very, very unique. In addition to her amazing ability to break down the information in a way that's very approachable and non-threatening, she also has some really original content in here. Number 8, a book from a genre you don't typically read. So like I was saying earlier, I'm a little bit new to this genre of romance. So a book that fits under this category for me is Dating Dr. Dil by Nisha Sharma. I read this on my Kobo from an ebook that I borrowed from my library, and I wasn't really expecting much, but I had a good time. I made another full video talking about this book, so I will link it up here for you. Check it out. I go a lot more in depth in that video, but I had a good time reading this book. This book, in combination with Amy Leah's 2 books that are shared, I definitely see myself reading a little bit more romance. Kind of have to see how I feel about the spice level in a book, because I really enjoyed Amy Leah's storytelling more than some of the more, I guess, spicier books. So that's something that I need to figure out. But these books have kind of converted me. I've jumped on the bandwagon a little bit of romance. Question number 9, a book that deserves all the hype it gets. So for this, I have Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Satanto. You've probably heard me talk a lot about this book because it is amazing. If you're at Finley Donovan is killing it, this is very similar to that, with a BIPOC character. So, and I believe Netflix also has bought the rights for the movie. I believe there was some really over the top auction, really over the top like battle. Everybody wanted rights for this book, but I believe it's Netflix that's got the rights. Anyway, this is a really lovely, funny comedy mystery genre that I was not aware of, that I have recently discovered. I absolutely enjoyed it. Follows our main protagonist, Medi, or Madeline Chen. She is an Indonesian Chinese woman living in California. And basically the book starts off with her going on a date and accidentally killing her date. And what follows from there is just this hilarious series of events where she relies on the help of her aunties, her very Indonesian Chinese aunties. There's a lot of family drama. There's a lot of like cultural dynamics. There's just a lot of comedy. It is over the top. It's quite fun. But I had a really, really good time reading this because that added layer of cultural piece in here really kind of pulls at your heartstrings a little bit, because there's a lot of similarities between, I think, between Medi's experience and what a lot of children of immigrants experience, and a lot of what children from collectivist cultures experience living in the West, where you feel, like you're living a double life, or you feel really torn between these like Western values and your like Eastern cultural values, and how Medi navigates that. There were times when I was laughing out loud, and there were times where I really felt for her, because it's obviously a very complex dynamic to navigate. But I really like how the story is told. It's a quick read, it's very funny. I had a great time. I actually liked the first one more than the second one. The second one in this series is called 4 Aunties and a Wedding. And the second one for me felt a bit like it was stretching it. I think I would have been fine with the book if it was just a standalone and didn't need to be a duology for me. But not that it's a true duology. The story ends with the first book, and then with the second one, it's another situation that Medi finds herself in. But Dial A for Aunties is a total gem, and I think it's totally worth all the hype that it's getting. Number 10, a book you usually recommend when asked to give a recommendation. For this, I have Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Bali Kaur Jaswal. Now, I absolutely love this book. This was on Reese Witherspoon's book club as well a couple years ago. That's how I was introduced to it. And this is a story of Nikki, who's the main protagonist, who's a young woman living in London, in Southall. And this book really centers around that Southall community in London, which is a very, if you're not aware, like a very Sikh Indian community. And this book was simultaneously hilarious, heart-wrenching, infuriating. So it really pulls at all of your heartstrings. But basically the story of Nikki, who is kind of in between jobs, and she decides she gets a job where she has to teach English, run like English classes at her local Gurdwara. And what is supposed to be English classes after a series of events turns into these like erotic storytelling classes for these older women, these senior women, these grandmas who come to the class. And it's just very kind of heartfelt, right? To see, I think, women at any age feeling liberated and empowered. And for me personally, that group of older women is a demographic that I think has been so invisible in kind of real life, but also in fiction. I don't know of many other books that talk about the experiences of older women and then now older brown women, right? I think that's a totally different ball game. The author, and I interviewed the author for my podcast, Brown People Problems. It's going to be coming out in a few weeks, this episode. Until then, if you want to check out some of the other podcast episodes, I'll link the podcast playlist up here. But I sat down with this author who was really lovely to talk to, and we really talked about how it takes a lot of courage to write something like this, but also the fact that older women are just sort of seen as really asexual, as not really having any needs, not really having any sort of fantasies. And so this was a really lovely take on the lives of older brown women. Like I said, there's some really funny parts. It's quite cheeky. And how this group of women, how they navigate, the cultural space as well, was very interesting to read. So if you're in the market for something that's really unique, this is something that I love recommending to people. Number 11, a book that has your favorite character or characters. For this, I have At Least You Have Your Health by Maddie Sinha. This is a book that I recently read, so I don't know if I have favorite characters in here, but I think the main protagonist, which is Dr. Maya Rao, gets pretty close to that. This is a story about a gynecologist in the States, Dr. Maya Rao, who works at a health clinic. Eventually, something happens where she's forced to walk away from her job, and she finds herself working for a boutique medical service for the wealthy, where she goes to the houses of wealthy women and gives them gynecological kind of treatment and service and advice. And I had just heard about this book from, I believe it was Lily Singh's book club, and I didn't know too much about it going into it, but I absolutely fell in love with this book. This book does such an amazing job of capturing what I imagine would be the sort of internal dilemma of a medical doctor to, kind of navigate this alternative health space, which is what she kind of finds herself in with her clients. There's a mystery element in here too, which I really, really enjoyed. And there's a lot of self-discovery and self-growth in here, right? I think a lot of us will see ourselves in the main character, Dr. Maya Rao, because she takes a lot of pride in her career. But at the same time, she's really she's burnt out. She's stretched super thin between children and running a house and a partnership and all of that, and a really demanding career. And I think this book did a really good job of shedding light on how women are always trying to do it all because we've been kind of socialized to want to do it all. And what happens when you're not able to do it all, right? And how do you face professional failures? How do you face professional setbacks? And the character's growth in this book was actually really, really great. I'm not going to give too much away because if I say more, I'm going to give the plot away, but I really enjoyed this. I think the part of this that really resonated with me was how, when we really try to idealize what we don't have and what we want, we run the risk of losing a lot of what we already have, because this sort of idealized, fantastical version of something doesn't really exist or is not what it seems. And that, I think, is something that a lot of us have experienced, and I really saw parts of myself in this protagonist. So this is something, again, not my favorite character. I don't even think I have a favorite character in fiction, but Dr. Rao gets pretty close to that. Number 12, a book you wish you could live in. Now, I actually don't have a book for this question, because as you can probably tell by my style of reading, most of my books are books that have some heavier themes in them, and I don't know if I would want to be living in any of these realities. Not when I say that out loud, the reality for a lot of BIPOC women is exactly what's in the book. In these books, that is exactly what our realities are like. So we're already kind of living in these books in a sense, if that makes sense. So I don't exactly have a book for this. Number 13, A book you thought you would hate but ended up loving. Now, I don't know if I thought I would hate this book, but the book that fits this category for me is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. Now, I had heard about this book for a really, really long time. I just never picked it up because when I read the back, it just didn't entice me. And given how much hype it received, I decided to one day just pick it up. You know what, I'm going to give it a shot. And I actually really, really enjoyed it. Such a Fun Age is basically about our main protagonist, who's a young Black woman who is a babysitter or a nanny for a sort of like wealthy white family. And this is a book that is just filled with all of these nuances of race and culture and prejudice and class and privilege and inequity and all of these heavier themes without being a heavy book. It's a really light read. It's fun to read. You really follow along the protagonist's story as she navigates, like her relationship, her emotional relationship with the child that she babysits, what it looks like, her relationship with the family as well, and what it's like to be a young Black woman in this really white space. And I thought that was really, really fascinating. And, the part that really kind of stood out for me was even people who kind of think they're really woke still end up making the same prejudices and engaging in the same practices that they don't want to, because discrimination, racial discrimination especially, is so nuanced, right? It's not so clear cut. There's a lot of like closet racism, there's a lot of microaggressions. And so this book did such a good job of just painting that picture and bringing a lot of those realities to the forefront. Again, it was actually like a feel-good read too. I know as I'm describing this, a lot of these themes just sound so overwhelming, but I was not breaking down in any of these books. It was very empowering to read and see all of these like fictional BIPOC women navigating, very similar challenges, right, that we experience today. So the second last one here is a book that made you cry. Now for this, I have The Last Queen by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. This is a historical fiction, so it's also a feminist retelling of Jinder Kaur, who was the youngest queen and the last queen of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who was the last sort of, I guess, king of Punjab, which is a part of India. Her story is quite a famous one in the sense that her son was taken from her by the British, taken to England, erased of his own culture, and had all of his, inheritance stolen from him, like all that good stuff. But this book is entirely from her perspective from beginning to the end. So from when she's born, and she comes from very humble roots to the very end. It's not mythological. It's a real story, a real woman in history, and it's a historical retelling of what maybe the author imagined she would say for herself if she had to write about her life story. So if you're not familiar with the timeline on this, we're looking at late 1800s to early to mid 1900s. So it's really quite a long span of time that this book covers, but it's not that thick. It's very fast paced. I completely flew through this. I thought this was great. The English is sort of very to the point, very succinct, and I think that was lovely because I imagine that's how she would have also spoken, very like clear, succinct fashion. I love it when authors really try to match the style of their writing with what they envision the personality of the character would be like. I really enjoy that. Again, it's a very empowering story, but just the history of this is very gut-wrenching. So if you enjoy historical fiction, you would really enjoy this, especially around like royalty and like navigating like palace politics, royal drama, things like that, but also has larger and more important themes of cultural trauma, colonialism, and some of that stuff. And the last recommendation, number 15, a book you wish you could read for the first time. Now for this, I have a book that I listened to, actually an audiobook, and I read the ebook from my Kobo from my library the day it came out. And that is Independence by the same author as the last, which is Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. Independence is a story that takes place just around the cusp of independence in India, which is around like 1946, I believe, is when the story starts, and goes through 1946, 1947, which is when the independence happened, and then a little bit after that. And it takes place actually in West Bengal. I haven't read many stories that are set in that region, and I certainly didn't know a lot about their partition story, but follows the story of three sisters who are in their late teens, early 20s, and what their own individual lives and challenges are like as they're kind of coming of age, but in a society that's at the brink of separation and rebellion and partition. And so you get a lot of this like historical perspective on what was happening for the country at large at that time, and the community at large, and the cities at that time, and then how that trickles down into the lives of these individual women, how it impacted their self-development, how it impacted their love life, how it impacted their career choices, their career moves, their family dynamics. So the author really kind of like put you in shoes of these women, and you were able to get a glimpse of what it was probably like to live during that time. When we read about a lot of historical events, prominent historical events, I think we just kind of read them as this singular fixed event in time that's, sort of happened. But books like this really help you see like the fluidity and the impact of trauma like this. Again, it's not such a heavy book as maybe I'm making it sound. It was actually really engaging. It was really uplifting. I fell in love with all three of the sisters, even though one of them is not my favorite. But I really fell in love with all three women and how they really like navigated life and how they stuck by each other. I think this was like a really lovely story of like sisterhood, of history. So it has a lot of great themes that you want to check out. Okay, that was a long one. Thanks for sticking around until now. And if you're still here, please let me know in the comment section what you thought of this video. If you have any other recommendations for me, please leave them down below. I would love to check them out. I'm always looking for more BIPOC reads, more inclusive reads. So let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in my next one.